The emergency sirens had been quiet for exactly 4 minutes when Daniel Reed walked through the main gates of the Galactic Containment Facility. He carried a worn backpack and a travel mug that smelled like cheap coffee. His assignment letter said to report for orientation, something about consulting on aggressive specimen behavior. Nobody had mentioned the smoking crater where the East Wing used to be that a security officer with purple skin and too many arms stopped him at the intercheckpoint. The officer's name tag read Thraxis, and his expression suggested he had seen better days. "You the human specialist?" Thraxis asked, his voice carrying the grinding quality of someone who had been awake too long. "Animal behaviorist, yeah." Daniel Reed. "First day." Thraxis laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Perfect timing. Your predecessor lasted 3 hours before he requested immediate transfer off-world. The one before that is still in medical receiving psychiatric treatment." Daniel set down his coffee. "What exactly am I working with? Come see for yourself." They walked through corridors lined with reinforced walls. Other facility workers hurried past, their faces tight with stress. Daniel noticed blast doors at every intersection, all of them sealed. Through observation windows, he glimpsed various contained creatures, some massive, others small, but radiating danger. This place housed things the galaxy feared too much to kill, but could not leave free. Thraxis led him to a command center overlooking a containment chamber the size of a sports arena. Inside, behind layers of energy barriers that crackled with lethal voltage, something moved. Daniel pressed closer to the glass. The creature defied easy description. It stretched maybe 30 meters long, covered in scales that looked like black glass. 12 eyes dotted its elongated head, each one glowing with a dim red light. 6 limbs ended in claws that seemed to bend space around them. When it shifted position, reality rippled outward like disturbed water. "What is it?" Daniel asked a doctor. Kellyanne, a scientist with silver fur and careful hands, answered from her station. "A void reaver. Juvenile, we think, though we have limited data. They come from the spaces between galaxies. This one was captured in the broken sector after it destroyed 3 colony ships and a military battle group. How many people died? 17,000 in the initial attacks. Another 200 during capture operations." Kellyanne pulled up images on her screen. Twisted metal, burning stations. They consume radiation and exotic matter. To them, our power cores are food sources. Our ships are snacks. Daniel watched the creature circle its prison. Its movements were not random. It tested the barriers at regular intervals, always in different spots, like it was searching for weaknesses. "And you want to study it," Daniel said. "The Galactic Council wants us to find a way to control it or at least understand it," Thraxis said. "Every species has tried. Nobody can get within 50 meters without suffering complete neural collapse. Its psychic presence destroys minds. How long do I have?" 18 hours. Then the Council deploys a star-killer weapon and erases this entire sector. The creature, the facility, all of us. They cannot risk it escaping. Daniel turned from the window. "Show me the previous approach attempts." For the next hour, he reviewed footage. Military personnel in heavy armor, collapsing before they reached the inner barrier. Psychics trying to make contact, screaming as their minds shattered. Robots that simply stopped functioning, their circuits fried by ambient energy. One scientist had tried using sedatives. The Void Reaver had absorbed the chemicals and grown larger. "Has anyone tried just talking to it?" Daniel asked. Thraxis stared at him. "Talking? Yeah. Has anyone sat down and tried basic communication? It is a galaxy killer, human. It does not communicate. It destroys." Daniel looked back at the containment chamber. The creature had stopped pacing. All 12 eyes were now focused on the command center. On him specifically. "It's scared," Daniel said quietly. "It killed 17,000 people," Kellyanne reminded him. "Scared things are dangerous. Doesn't mean they are not scared." Daniel picked up his backpack. "I need access to the containment area. Not inside the barriers, just close enough to be seen clearly." "Absolutely not," Thraxis said. "Then you might as well activate that star killer now, because nobody here has any other ideas." The 2 aliens exchanged glances. Finally, Kellyanne nodded. 20 minutes later, Daniel stood in the containment chamber, separated from the Void Reaver by 3 layers of energy barriers. The creature's psychic presence pressed against his mind like a physical weight. He felt pressure behind his eyes, a buzzing in his teeth. Around him, monitoring equipment screamed warnings. The Void Reaver approached the barrier, its massive form blocking out the overhead lights. This close, Daniel could see details. Scars on its scales, a damaged plate on its left side that had not healed properly. One of its eyes was clouded, probably blind. In the command center, Thraxus was shouting for him to retreat. Daniel ignored him. He slowly lowered himself to the floor, crossing his legs, making himself smaller, less threatening. He kept his hands visible and empty. The Void Reaver tilted its head, the gesture almost curious. Daniel waited. His training with aggressive wildlife had taught him patience. Animals rarely attacked when they were not cornered, not threatened, not defending resources. They needed reasons. This creature had been captured, imprisoned, surrounded by beings that feared it. Of course, it was dangerous. But right now, it was not attacking. It was watching. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Then 2. The creature settled onto the floor, its body coiling into a resting position. It never looked away from Daniel. And Daniel never looked away from IT. In the command center, Kellyanne checked her instruments 3 times. Its psychic output is decreasing. I have never seen this before. Thraxus watched the human and the monster regard each other in silence. What is he doing? Thraxus asked. I think, Kellyanne said slowly, he is making a friend. 3 days had passed since Daniel first sat down in front of the Void Reaver. He returned every morning with his coffee and his patience. The creature no longer tested the barriers when he was present. Instead, it watched him with those 12 glowing eyes, occasionally shifting its position but never attacking. The facility staff thought he was wasting time. The council had extended their deadline by 1 week, but opinions remained divided. Thraxus attended every session, arms crossed, waiting for the experiment to fail. On the 4th day, Daniel brought food. Not the standard nutrient blocks the facility used for contained specimens. Those sat in a rejected pile in the corner of the chamber, untouched for weeks. Daniel had raided his personal supplies instead. Dried fruit, protein bars, a chunk of aged cheese from Earth that had cost him half a week's salary. He set items near the inner barrier, within reach of the creature if it chose to extend a limb through the energy field. The barrier would permit organic matter to pass, though the passage would be painful. The Void Reaver did not move. Daniel returned to his spot and waited. Hours crawled by. Kellyanne monitored from the command center, her instruments tracking every flicker of psychic energy. The creature's scales shifted through subtle color changes, patterns emerging that the doctor had never seen in previous observations. She made notes frantically. Finally, as afternoon shift began, one of the creature's claws extended slowly toward the barrier. The energy field crackled against its scales, but the Void Reaver pushed through. Its claw was the size of Daniel's entire torso. 3 talons that could rip through battleship hulls closed delicately around the piece of cheese. The creature withdrew, examined the offering, then consumed it in one quick motion. Its scales rippled, colors brightening from black to deep gray. Daniel permitted himself a small smile. Over the following days, he established patterns. Same arrival time, same calm movements, same low voice narrating his actions. The Void Reaver began responding. When Daniel spoke, the creature's eyes focused. When Daniel stood, the creature tracked his movement, but no longer postured defensively. That he introduced variety to the food offerings, testing preferences. The Void Reaver ignored sweet items, but responded strongly to anything aged or fermented. It seemed to enjoy textures, spending time examining items before consuming them. On day 7, Daniel noticed something crucial. The creature kept favoring its left side. That damaged plate he had spotted during their first meeting had not healed. Under the harsh containment lighting, he could see the wound more clearly. The edges were discolored, probably infected. The facility's radiation barriers, designed to prevent the creature from regenerating, were slowly killing it. Daniel called Kellyanne down to the chamber. That wound needs treatment, he told her, pointing through the barriers. Kellyanne adjusted her viewing instruments. You are right. The damage is extensive, but we cannot lower the barriers to treat it. The moment we do, the psychic pressure would incapacitate everyone in the facility. Not everyone, Daniel said. It does not affect me the same way. You have some resistance, yes, but full exposure would be deadly. We have no data suggesting otherwise. Then get me protective equipment. Psychic dampeners. Whatever you have. Thraxis, listening through comms, cut in immediately. Absolutely not. You are not entering that chamber. The creature is suffering. If we want cooperation, we need to show we are not torturers. It killed 17,000 people, and it is a juvenile, probably confused and terrified, stuck in a cage with beings that radiate hostility. Look at the behavioral data. Since I started working with it, aggression markers are down 70%. It is not a mindless killer. It is hurt and scared. The argument continued for hours. Daniel refused to back down. Eventually, Kellyanne sided with him. The creature represented unprecedented scientific value, and losing it to infection would waste everything. Thraxis finally, reluctantly, agreed to a modified approach. They would lower the radiation barriers in one small section for exactly 10 minutes. Daniel would enter with medical supplies. If the creature showed any aggression, Thraxis would flood the chamber with enough firepower to reduce both human and Void Reaver to component atoms. The next morning, Daniel stood at the chamber entrance wearing a pressure suit equipped with every psychic dampener the facility could provide. Medical supplies were strapped to his back. His hands shook slightly as he checked the seals. Kellyanne's voice crackled through his helmet. Radiation barriers lowering in Section 4. You have 10 minutes. The energy fields flickered and died in one corner of the chamber. The Void Reaver immediately moved toward that section, settling into the space like it had been waiting for this opportunity. Daniel walked forward. The psychic presence hit him like a wave. His dampeners screamed warnings, barely holding back the full force of the creature's mind. Through the pressure, he felt something unexpected. Not malice or hunger. Loneliness. Confusion. Pain. The Void Reaver lowered itself, exposing the wounded plate on its underside. It was showing vulnerability. Asking for help. Daniel knelt beside the wound, hands trembling. This close, he could see the creature's breathing, feel the heat radiating from its body. One wrong move, and those claws could end him instantly. He opened the medical kit and began working. The Void Reaver remained perfectly still. Its scales shifted to lighter colors, patterns forming that almost resembled relaxation. When Daniel applied antiseptic to the wound, the creature made a sound, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the deck plating, not pain. Something else. Relief, maybe, or gratitude. Daniel finished treatment and applied synthetic skin to protect the wound. The 10 minutes had stretched to 15, but Thraxis had not fired. As Daniel stepped back, the Void Reaver's claw extended slowly. It touched his helmet gently, carefully, the same way a human might touch a friend's shoulder. "We're going to call you Buddy," Daniel said quietly. "Is that okay?" The creature's eyes brightened. The humming sound continued. In the command center, Kellyanne wiped tears from her silver fur. Historical. Absolutely historical. Even Thraxis had lowered his weapons. "I do not believe what I am seeing." "Believe it," Kellyanne said. "We just made first contact with a Void Reaver." Word spread through the facility like wildfire. The human had touched a Void Reaver and lived. More than lived, he had treated its wounds. The impossible creature was responding to basic kindness. Daniel spent every day with Buddy now. The radiation barriers remained lowered in Section 4, creating a safe zone where the creature could rest without constant pain. Its wound was healing properly. The scales regained their color, shifting through shades Daniel had learned to read like a mood chart. Dark meant stressed. Gray meant calm. Lighter tones with blue undertones meant content. Buddy followed Daniel around the containment area now, moving with surprising grace for something so massive. When Daniel sat, Buddy coiled nearby. When Daniel worked on reports, Buddy watched with evident curiosity. The creature had started bringing gifts, pieces of equipment it found interesting. Yesterday's offering had been a completely disassembled maintenance drone, laid out like puzzle pieces. The facility staff had stopped being terrified and started being fascinated. Even Thraxus spent his breaks watching the interactions through the observation windows. On day 14, Daniel noticed new behavior. Buddy kept rolling onto its back, exposing the now-healed underside. On Earth, this was a trust signal in dozens of species. Dogs did it. Cats did it. Even some reptiles displayed vulnerable areas to show they felt safe. Daniel sat cross-legged near Buddy's head. "What are you trying to tell me?" Buddy shifted again, scales glinting under the lights. The humming sound started, that deep vibration that made the floor buzz. On impulse, Daniel reached out and gently scratched the scales on Buddy's exposed underside. They were warm, smooth, with just enough texture to provide friction. Buddy's 12 eyes half closed. The humming intensified, becoming almost musical. The creature's psychic presence pulsed outward in rhythmic waves that felt like contentment made tangible. Daniel laughed. "You like belly rubs. A galaxy killer likes belly rubs." He continued scratching, finding spots that made Buddy's eyes close completely, places where the creature leaned into the contact. This being that had destroyed battleships was now making sounds that could only be described as happy purring. Kellyan recorded everything from the command center. "I need to revise every paper I have ever written about aggressive species behavior." The video footage reached the Galactic Council within hours. Daniel receiving belly rubs to a creature that had killed thousands became the most watched file in Council history. Reactions ranged from amazement to outrage. High Admiral Cortuz arrived 3 days later with a military escort and a terrible expression. But he was from a species that valued strength and direct action. Scars covered his gray skin, evidence of battles survived. He had lost family to Void Reaver attacks years ago. His opinions on the creatures were well documented and extremely hostile. Thraxus met him at the facility entrance. "Admiral, welcome to... Where is the human?" Cortuz interrupted. They found Daniel in the containment chamber, sitting beside Buddy while eating lunch. The Void Reaver was examining Daniel's sandwich with evident interest, occasionally making questioning sounds. Cortuz watched through the observation window, his expression unreadable. "I have reviewed the reports," he said finally. "The council is divided. Half believe this represents a breakthrough. The other half believes you are being manipulated by a creature too intelligent to show its true nature." Daniel joined them in the command center, leaving Buddy visible through the window behind him. The creature pressed against the glass, watching Daniel anxiously. "What do you believe?" Daniel asked. "I believe in evidence. Demonstrate control. Make the creature perform specific actions on command. That is not how this works. Buddy is not controlled. He cooperates because he chooses to." Semantics. Either you can direct its behavior, or you cannot. I can ask. Sometimes he agrees. Sometimes he does not. It is called free will. Cortuz's expression hardened. "Then we have a problem. The council needs assurance this creature can be managed. If you cannot provide that, I have orders to terminate the experiment. Permanently." Kellyan stepped forward. "Admiral, with respect, we have made more progress in 2 weeks than the galaxy has made in centuries of studying Void Reavers. The aggression we have documented was defensive behavior from a juvenile separated from its kind. This changes everything. Or it is an anomaly. One creature's unusual reaction to one human's approach." Cortuz turned back to Daniel. "I will give you one test. Simple command. Make it move from one side of the chamber to the other on your command. Prove you have genuine influence." Daniel looked at Buddy through the window. The creature's scales had darkened to worried gray. It could sense the tension. "He is not a pet," Daniel said quietly. "Then he is a threat. Those are the only 2 categories that matter." Daniel entered the containment chamber alone. Buddy rushed to him immediately, pressing close, making anxious sounds. Daniel placed his hand on the creature's nearest scale. "I am sorry," he whispered. "These people do not understand yet." He tried explaining what Cortuz wanted. Buddy watched him, eyes tracking his gestures. Daniel pointed across the chamber. "Can you move over there?" Just for a minute. Buddy tilted his head. Please. I need to see we understand each other. The creature looked toward the observation window, where Cortez stood with weapons ready. Then back at Daniel. Then at the spot Daniel had indicated, Buddy moved across the chamber. Not quickly, but deliberately. He settled in the new location, then looked back at Daniel expectantly. Return, Daniel said. Buddy came back, coiling around Daniel protectively to I in the command center, silence stretched. Finally, Cortez spoke. How did humans develop this ability? We did not develop it. We just never forgot it. On Earth, we were never the strongest species. We survived by learning to understand creatures that could kill us. We made friends with wolves, and they became dogs. We domesticated horses, cats, birds. We learned that most dangerous things are just scared things that need patience. Cortez was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. The council will want a proposal. A program using human specialists for containment situations, starting with returning this juvenile to its kind. Can you do that? Return Buddy home? Yes, absolutely. Then prepare for a long-range mission. We're going to find out where these creatures come from. Cortez paused at the door. And human? We have 67 other containment failures throughout council space. Creatures we cannot kill, but cannot control. After this, your skills will be in demand. Daniel watched through the window as Cortez left. Buddy nuzzled against him, seeking reassurance. Looks like we are taking a trip, Daniel told his unusual friend. Want to see where you come from? The humming sound returned, contentment replacing anxiety. Buddy's scales shifted to bright gray-blue. Daniel smiled and resumed the belly rubs. The ship was called Wanderer, a deep space explorer retrofitted to carry very unusual cargo. Special sections have been built to Buddy specifications, areas where the Void Reaver could move freely without endangering the crew. The walls were lined with materials he could safely consume, keeping him fed during the long journey. Daniel walked through the cargo bay, where Buddy rested, checking on his friend for the 5th time that shift. The creature had adapted remarkably well to ship life. He explored the vessel with obvious curiosity, his psychic presence now refined enough that crew members could work nearby without discomfort. Thraxis had volunteered for the mission. The security officer who had once mocked Daniel's methods now spent his off hours studying human-animal psychology texts. He stood in the cargo bay doorway, watching Buddy examine a cargo container. He acts like a child, Thraxis observed. He's a child. Juvenile. Maybe equivalent to a human teenager. Daniel tossed Buddy a piece of the aged cheese that had become the creature's favorite treat. Buddy caught it eagerly, scales brightening. We took him from his family. Now we get to give him back. Dr. Kellyan's voice crackled over the ship's communication system. All personnel to the bridge. We have a situation. The bridge was cramped compared to military vessels, designed for science rather than combat. Kellyan stood at the sensor station. Her fur bristled with stress. On the main screen, a distress signal played on repeat. Mining colony in the outer belt. Population 40,000. They are under attack. Kellyan pulled up visual data. Daniel felt his stomach drop. On the screen, a massive Void Reaver, easily 3 times Buddy's size, was tearing through the colony's defensive shields. It had latched onto their primary reactor, feeding on the radiation output. Explosions lit the darkness as the colony's weapons fired uselessly against the creature's hide. An adult, Kellyan said quietly. Fully mature. The colony's distress message was desperate. Their shields would fail in hours. When that happened, the reactor breach would kill everyone on the station. Thraxis checked tactical data. The colony defense force has engaged with everything they have. No effect. They are requesting immediate military support, but the nearest council fleet is 6 days away. We are 3 hours away. Kellyan noted that Daniel's communicator buzzed. High Admiral Cortez appeared on the screen, his expression grim. You have seen the situation. I am ordering the Wanderer to intervene. Use your Void Reaver to drive off the adult. Prove the program works. Buddy is not a weapon, Daniel said immediately. He is a tool we have invested significant resources in developing. 40,000 lives are at stake. This is not a request. The connection cut off. Daniel turned to his crew. Kellyanne looked torn. Thraxis was already running combat calculations. Through the walls, Daniel could feel Buddy's presence, the creature sensing his emotional turmoil. "We cannot use him like this," Daniel said. "Everything we built was based on trust, on showing him he is not just a weapon. If we betray that now, 40,000 people will die," Thraxis interrupted. "I understand your principles, human, but can you live with that many deaths on your conscience?" Daniel closed his eyes. "There has to be another way." Kellyanne suddenly straightened at her station. "What if we try communicating? Not using Buddy as a weapon, but as a translator, an intermediary." "Void Reavers do not negotiate," Thraxis said, "because nobody has ever tried properly." Buddy responds to Daniel. Maybe the adult would respond to Buddy. It was insane, dangerous beyond measure. The adult had already killed hundreds in its attack. But Daniel could not see another option that did not involve betraying everything he had taught Buddy about trust. "Set course for the colony," he said, "and someone give me a better psychic dampener. I have a feeling I'm going to need it." The Wanderer dropped out of faster-than-light travel 3 hours later. The colony hung in space ahead, its shields flickering, the massive adult Void Reaver visible as a dark shape against the station's lights. Buddy became agitated immediately. His scales flashed through rapid color changes. The humming sounds he made were different from his usual contentment, higher-pitched, almost excited. "He recognizes the adult," Kellyanne said, monitoring Buddy's psychic output. "The signature is similar enough. They might be from the same family group." Daniel suited up in the cargo bay. His protective gear was upgraded with every dampener the Wanderer carried. It probably would not be enough if both Void Reavers decided to fight, but he had to try. Buddy pressed against him anxiously, making questioning sounds. "I need your help," Daniel told his friend. "That creature attacking the colony? It does not know those people need that reactor to survive. Can you help me explain?" Buddy tilted his massive head, eyes focusing intently on Daniel's face. "I am asking, not ordering. If you want to stay here where it is safe, I understand. But those people will die if we do nothing." For a long moment, Buddy was still. Then he moved toward the airlock, looking back at Daniel expectantly. Together, they left the ship in a shielded transport pod. The adult Void Reaver noticed immediately. It released the reactor and turned, all its attention now on the approaching pod. Daniel could feel the creature's psychic presence even through the shielding, vastly more powerful than Buddy's. This was what the galaxy feared. This was a Void Reaver in its prime. Buddy called out, his psychic voice carrying across the void of space. The adult paused, listening, and then, impossibly, it answered. The exchange that followed happened beyond human language. Daniel, caught between the two creatures, experienced fragments. Concepts rather than words. Recognition. Questions about the strange, small being with the juvenile. Confusion about why the feeding was being interrupted. Daniel tried to project his own thoughts, focusing on images of the colony's population. Living beings. Families. Children. This was not an abandoned reactor. It was food stolen from mouths. The adult's attention shifted to the colony, really seeing it perhaps for the first time. Its psychic presence changed, taking on textures Daniel interpreted as surprise, then something that might have been understanding. Through Buddy, Daniel offered an alternative. Kellyanne had identified a neutron star 2 systems away, spilling radiation into space. Natural, abundant, unclaimed, the adult considered this. Its massive form shifted, reality bending around it. Then it released the reactor completely and began moving away from the colony. Behind them, the colony's distress signals changed to confused gratitude. Their sensors showed the impossible, a Void Reaver retreating without being driven away. But Daniel's relief was short-lived. Long-range sensors suddenly lit up with new contacts. Kellyanne's voice came through his helmet, strained with barely controlled panic. "Daniel, we have 7 more Void Reaver signatures inbound. Adult-sized. They are converging on our position." Through the transport pod's viewports, Daniel watched space tear open as massive forms emerged from faster-than-light travel. 7 more creatures, each as large as the first, surrounded the Wanderer. Buddy's excitement had returned, his scales flashing brilliant colors Daniel had never seen before. They had not just found one adult. They had found Buddy's entire family. And now that family wanted to meet the strange creatures who had befriended their lost juvenile. 7 adult Void Reavers surrounded the Wanderer, their combined psychic presence creating pressure waves that made the ship's hull groan. On the bridge, half the crew had collapsed from psychic overload despite their dampeners. Kellyanne clutched her console, breathing hard, trying to stay conscious. Only Thraxis remained standing beside Daniel, though the security officer's face had gone pale. "This is it. We're all going to die." But Daniel watched Buddy through the transport pod's viewport. The juvenile was not afraid. His scales had brightened to colors so vivid they almost hurt to look at. He was calling out, his psychic voice carrying joy and recognition. The largest adult, its scales showing age patterns, approached the pod. This close, Daniel could see its true size. It dwarfed Buddy the way an adult elephant dwarfed a calf. Reality warped around it, space bending to accommodate its impossible mass. Through his upgraded dampeners, Daniel felt the adult's attention focus on him. Its psychic presence was overwhelming, vast beyond comprehension. But underneath the raw power, he sensed something familiar. The same emotions he had felt in Buddy. Curiosity, caution, and relief. This was Buddy's parent. The adult extended an appendage toward the pod. Buddy rushed forward, pressing against the barrier. Parent and child touched through the energy shield, their psychic presences merging. Daniel experienced a fragment of their reunion. Months of separation. The parents' desperate search. The juvenile's fear and confusion during capture, followed by the strange period with the soft creatures who offered food and gentleness. The concept of a human giving belly rubs passed between them, and Daniel could have sworn the adult showed amusement that Kellyanne's voice crackled weakly through his helmet. "Daniel, the adults, they're not attacking. They're just watching us. They are Buddy's family," Daniel realized. They had been looking for him. The pod's outer hatch suddenly opened. Daniel's heart raced as the vacuum of space surrounded him. His suit's emergency systems activated, but before panic could set in, he felt it. The adult Void Reaver had extended a field around him, creating a pocket of warp space where he could exist safely. Buddy joined him outside the pod, pressing close. Together, they floated in space between the Wanderer and the gathering of adults. The largest adult approached, moving with careful precision. Up close, Daniel could see scars on its scales, evidence of a long life surviving in the harsh spaces between galaxies. Its 12 eyes studied him with obvious intelligence. Then it did something unprecedented. It shared its memories, not violently, like the psychic attacks the galaxy had documented. Gently, like showing photographs to a friend. Daniel experienced life as a Void Reaver, hunting in the dark spaces, feeding on cosmic radiation. The slow discovery of inhabited space and the creatures that live there. The confusion when those creatures attacked on sight. The pain of losing family members to military actions. And recently, the agony of losing a juvenile who had wandered too close to dangerous territory and vanished. Daniel understood now. The attacks the galaxy recorded were not malicious. They were the actions of beings who did not recognize civilization as alive. To a Void Reaver, the difference between a star and a fusion reactor was meaningless. Both were food sources. They had no concept that their feeding destroyed homes and killed people. Nobody had ever tried to explain it to them. Through Buddy, Daniel began projecting his own memories. Life on Earth, cities full of people, the vulnerability of species that evolved on planets instead of in the void of space. The concept that what Void Reavers saw as food, others saw as survival, the adult listened. Its vast intelligence processed this new information. Other adults gathered closer, sharing in the exchange. Daniel showed them the colony they had just saved. Families, children, beings not so different from Void Reaver pods, just smaller and more fragile. One of the adults responded, sharing question. If the small soft beings needed the reactor radiation, where should Void Reavers feed? The galaxy was so full of these claimed sources. Kellyanne had anticipated this. Through the ship's communication system, she transmitted data to Daniel's suit. He shared it with the Void Reavers. Maps of the galaxy showing inhabited zones and empty spaces. Neutron stars spinning in isolation. Black holes radiating energy in regions no species claimed. Vast areas of space where Void Reavers could feed without encountering civilization. The adults considered this carefully. It was a radical concept. Sharing space. Coexisting instead of competing. The largest adult made a decision. Its psychic presence expanded, carrying a message not just to Daniel, but broadcasting on frequencies the Wanderer could record. Kellyanne translated later, but Daniel felt the meaning in real time. We understand now. The small soft beings are not prey. They are neighbors. We remember the one who taught our child trust. We remember those who chose kindness over killing. We will feed in the empty spaces. We will not harm the small ones' homes. If our kind are found lost or hurt, treat them as you treated our child. With patience, with gentleness, not with weapons. It was a treaty, the first in galactic history between Void Reavers and the rest of civilization. The adult turned to Buddy, communicating privately. The juvenile responded, his scales showing conflict. After a moment, he approached Daniel. Buddy pressed his largest claw gently against Daniel's chest, the gesture Daniel had taught him weeks ago. A gesture of pack, of family. Then Buddy turned to the transport pod and nudged it toward the Wanderer. He was saying goodbye. Daniel felt his throat tighten. You should go with them. Your family needs you. But Buddy hesitated. He looked at his parent, then back at Daniel. His scales flashed through questioning colors. The adult made a sound, deep and resonant. Then it did something that made Kellyanne gasp on the bridge. It projected a message directly to the Wanderer's systems, bypassing the need for interpretation. The child wishes to travel with the soft ones longer, to learn more of your worlds. We will return in one cycle of your star. If he wishes to stay with his kind, then he will stay. If he wishes to remain with you, we will permit it. Our child has found something rare. Friendship across the void. We will not end such a thing. Daniel looked at Buddy, who was practically vibrating with hopeful anticipation. You want to stay? Buddy's humming sound returned, the one that meant contentment and joy. His scales brightened. Then welcome aboard, Daniel said, scratching the scales under Buddy's jaw. We have a lot more places to see. The adult Void Reavers began departing, tearing holes in space as they returned to their territory. But the largest one paused, looking back at Daniel one final time. Through Buddy, it sent a last message. Gratitude, recognition of something precious, and a promise to remember the human who asked if galaxy killers liked belly rubs. The Galactic Council chambers had never been so crowded. Representatives from 200 species packed the galleries, all wanting to witness the historic session. At the center of the floor stood Daniel Reed, with Buddy coiled protectively beside him. The juvenile Void Reaver's presence made several delegates nervous, but nobody demanded his removal. Not after what had happened. High Admiral Cortez presented the mission report himself. The successful communication with adult Void Reavers. The treaty negotiated without a single shot fired. The colony saved. 200 years of hostile encounters ended by one human who offered cheese and belly rubs instead of weapons. This changes everything, Cortez told the assembly. We have classified entire species as threats based on fear and misunderstanding. How many others could we reach if we tried patience instead of force? Dr. Kellyanne stood beside him, displaying her research. Void Reavers are not mindless destroyers. They are highly intelligent, social creatures. They have family structures. They experience emotions. They were simply operating without understanding that their food sources were also our life support systems. Nobody had ever explained the difference. The council's debate lasted 3 days. Some species argued that Daniel's success was an anomaly, that most dangerous creatures could not be reasoned with. Others saw opportunity. The galaxy had hundreds of unsolved containment situations, creatures too dangerous to release but resistant to all control methods. Finally, the council voted. The Interspecies Cooperation Program was established with immediate funding. Humans would lead the initiative, bringing their unique evolutionary perspective to galactic-scale problems. Daniel was appointed as director, despite his protest that he was just an animal behaviorist who liked his job. Thraxis requested transfer to the program before Daniel even left the council chambers. The security officer had seen enough. Whatever humans possessed, that ability to look at monsters and see frightened children, he wanted to learn it. The program's first facility opened 6 months later on a neutral world. The containment cells were different from traditional facilities. Larger, more comfortable, designed with the creature's needs in mind rather than just security concerns. Daniel walked through the facility on opening day, Buddy trailing behind him like an enormous, reality-warping puppy. The creature had grown in the past months, his scales now showing adult patterns beginning to emerge. But he still followed Daniel everywhere, still sought belly rubs, still brought gifts of things he found interesting. Their first case waited in Containment Cell 7. A creature from the quarantine sector, something that dissolved matter on contact and had killed 30 handlers. The facility director was skeptical, her 4 eyes showing doubt. "It cannot be reasoned with," she insisted. "Every approach has failed." Daniel studied the creature through the observation window. It huddled in the corner of its cell, as far from the walls as possible. Its body was translucent, constantly shifting form. When guards approached, it lashed out desperately. "It is not attacking," Daniel said quietly. "It is terrified of being touched. Look at the scarring on its surface. Injury patterns from weapons testing. You have been hurting it trying to establish control, and it has been defending itself the only way it knows how." He turned to the director. "Give me 3 days. No weapons testing. No aggressive approaches. Just time." The director agreed reluctantly. Daniel spent the first day simply sitting outside the cell, visible but not threatening. The creature watched him constantly, its form rippling with what might have been anxiety, but on the second day, he noticed the creature responded to sound. When machinery activated, it flinched. When Daniel spoke in low tones, it settled slightly. On the third day, Daniel brought music. Old Earth classical, something with gentle strings. He played it outside the cell while he worked on reports. The creature moved closer to the barrier, drawn by the sounds. Its form stabilized, becoming more solid. Less chaotic. By evening, it was pressing against the energy field as close to the music as it could get. Daniel smiled. Another scared being, another chance to build trust. This was going to take time, but time was something he had learned to give freely. Kellyanne visited weekly, documenting everything. Her papers on the Void Reaver Treaty had revolutionized xenobiology. Now she was writing about dozens of species, showing that aggression usually masked fear, that violence often stemmed from misunderstanding. The galaxy was learning, slowly, to ask different questions. Not how do we destroy this, but what does it need? Not how do we control it, but how do we coexist? News feeds across council space showed the changes. Void Reaver sightings in inhabited zones had dropped to 0. The creatures kept to their territories in deep space, feeding on cosmic radiation far from colonies. When juvenile Void Reavers were found wandering, they were returned to their families instead of captured. Several species had established trade relationships with Void Reaver pods, exchanging information about radiation-rich regions for safe passage through their territories. Other dangerous species were being reevaluated. The dissolution entities that haunted dead nebulas turned out to be territorial, not malicious. The phase hunters that terrified shipping lanes were actually fleeing something worse in their home dimension. The gravity singers that destroyed space stations were trying to communicate and did not understand their songs were lethal to most species. Each revelation brought the same lesson. Monsters were just people nobody had tried to understand. 1 year after the treaty, Buddy's family returned as promised. The Wanderer met them at the coordinates deep in neutral space. Buddy emerged from the ship, now nearly adult-sized, his scales showing the full patterns of maturity. His parent approached, and they communicated for hours. Daniel waited, knowing this moment had been coming. Buddy had to choose, his kind or his adopted family. When Buddy returned to the ship, Daniel saw the answer in the juvenile scales. He had visited with his family. They would meet regularly now, keeping those bonds strong. But Buddy had found something in the galaxy he could not find in the void. Purpose. Friendship across impossible divides. A place where being different was not a threat, but a gift. Buddy pressed his claw against Daniel's chest. The gesture now returned habitually between them. Family. Daniel reached up and scratched the scales under Buddy's jaw, right in the spot that made the big creature's eyes half close with contentment. Ready for the next one? Daniel asked. We have 66 more cases waiting. Buddy's humming sound filled the ship, resonant and warm. Together, Human and Void Reaver walked back inside, ready to show the galaxy that the most dangerous monsters just needed someone to ask if they liked belly rubs.